Hey everyone, this is Greg with Spotted Tongue Woodworking, and today we're going to turn it up to 11 and build an acoustic accent wall.
You can see, the numbers all go to 11.
Not too long ago, a friend of mine reached out asking if I'd be willing to build an accent wall. Not just any accent wall, but an acoustic, sound diffusing accent wall. After going back and forth a few times trying to determine the exact lumber and design that we would choose, we ended up going with a vertical slat sassafras acoustic sound wall. The original lumber for this project was actually ash, not sassafras, but after spending several days calling around trying to find ash in sufficient quantities, which is becoming harder and harder due to the emerald ash borer, which is killing all the ash trees, we settled on using sassafras. And it's not that sassafras is a lesser wood than ash. I actually think sassafras is a better choice for this accent wall due to the fact that it is a little bit softer, it resonates a little bit more, it smells nice, and it has a beautiful light color that is very clean and modern. Additionally, sassafras, at least in my experience, is a very stable wood. So this lumber straight from the mill was actually fairly flat to begin with. So where I started by planing 100 board feet of sassafras. And let me tell you, that was a lot of wood chips and a lot of wood dust. I filled up the dust collector several times, clogged it a few times, but the end result is this incredibly clean, clear, light colored lumber that I was excited to work with. Because this wood was so stable, again, I did not have to face joint them. I just ran them through the planer until I reached my desired finished thickness at just under 1 inch. After that, I cut them all to rough lengths. The quickest way to straighten or flatten a board is to cut it to as close to your desired dimensions as possible. So cutting to the rough lengths before running them over the jointer means that I will have more material to work with when it comes to ripping them down to length. And obviously when I say ripping to length, I mean ripping to width. So running these boards on the jointer, the way I approach doing boards on a jointer is much like building a deck, where the approach is you want to place the boards crown side up. That is, the bow in the middle faces up and the two droopy ends face down. That allows me to run the whole board across the planer, jointer, not a planer, it's a jointer, and get a nice straight edge along that long bed jointer. A good rule of thumb with using a jointer and determining the maximum length that you can joint is that you can effectively joint twice the length of the bed of the jointer. So, for example, if you have a 48-inch bed jointer, you can joint an 8-foot board as long as you can balance it correctly. After jointing my straight edges on these boards and figuring out exactly how many strips I need and how many strips I can get from each of the boards, I head over to the table saw and cut 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches again and again and again and again. We ended up across the wall. There are 55 of these strips, so a lot of repetition. And the key with that, again, with the sassafras being so stable, meant that every cut counted. If I were to use a different lumber, a different wood, there's a very good chance, I have it a lot happen with soft and hard maple, plain sawn white oak, some walnut. Doing boards that thin at 1.5 inches, a lot of other lumber would curve and twist and bend, whereas the sassafras is incredibly stable and stays straight with each cut. If you've gotten this far and you don't know what I mean when I say vertical slat acoustic sound wall, here's a little diagram of what I'm going to be doing. The wall is just under 12 feet wide. It is 8 feet above the floorboard, baseboard, and I'm going to be running slats across the whole width of the wall. It's going to be offset about 4 inches to the front of this accent wall. There will be a gap behind these slats where the sound can resonate. I will be going for a true hidden fastener design. I will be using these nylon furniture dowels to attach my slats to the cross pieces that will be anchored to the wall. These little dowels have barbs on them. They will grab the wood, they will hold it tight, but they will also mean that these slats are removable and can be moved and placed elsewhere. Like I said, there were 55 of these slats, and the big dummy that I am, I didn't cut my jointed boards to length before ripping these widths. So what I ended up having to do is I ended up having 55 slats that I needed to cut to final length. Because they were 8 feet long, I could not set up a stop, so I had to measure and cut each board individually. But that's the nature of the game. After cutting all these boards to their final length and to ensure that they're all absolutely the same width, I ran them again through the planer with a cast iron bed. This cast iron bed means that running these boards on edge won't deform the bed or cause any harm to the planer. And by now, I'm sure you're thinking it. I'm thinking it. I have 55 slats. I'm going to be attaching them to the wall using these furniture dowels, which probably means I need to drill a lot of holes. And you'd be correct. My design calls for 6 cross pieces behind the slats, so 6 cross pieces with 55 slats would mean I need 330 of these nylon dowels. The dummy that I am, I actually only ordered 300, which will come up later, but I have to have 330 dowels, but both the slats and the cross pieces need holes, which means 660 holes. I don't know about you, but to me, that's a lot of holes, that's a lot of measuring, and that's a lot of drilling. So I want to find a way to make this as quick and easy as I can possibly do it. And I made a jig. Actually, I made 2 different jigs. The first jig was for the 1.5 slats on the cross pieces. So I have the drilling on center for the 1.5 pieces with an inch space in between them. That will ensure when it comes time to install this accent wall in place that everything will already be in alignment, everything will already be set up. I can just install these cross pieces and push the slats into place. There's nothing incredibly fancy about this jig. I laminated pieces of plywood together, so I made thicker plywood out of thinner plywood, had all my holes marked out, pre-drilled all those holes, and then used those holes as drill guides to drill all of the slat pieces. Even though it is simple, what this ensures is that every piece will be the same. There are always variations when you measure by hand, especially when you measure that many holes by hand. And I think that's the name of the game. It's a little bit of innovation, it's a little bit of thinking on your feet, and no, you don't have to hold on to the jig afterwards, but you've done it, you know how to do it, and you can easily do it again. I was actually really happy with this second jig for the slats rather than the cross pieces because I was able to figure it out, or not necessarily figure it out, but set up the spacing so that the slats, there's 6 holes on each of these 55 slats, but all the holes on, you flip it upside down, right side up, they're going to be exactly the same, so I couldn't mess it up. And again, that was 330 holes on the cross pieces and then 330 more holes on the slat. And we probably could have left it at that, but I truly believe there are a few finishing touches that will really separate a professional product from a DIY project. For example, this 1/16 roundover. I did a 1/16 roundover on every single one of the edges of these boards and slats, and it feels like the board has been crafted rather than just cut and slapped into place. A neat little trick when doing roundovers is to actually do the roundover before you sand, because if you do the roundover before you sand, there could probably be a little bit of a lip where the edge of the roundover catches the top of the board, and then you can sand down to the top of that roundover and keep the roundover, but then also have a sanded, finished face. So after putting a roundover on all these cross pieces and slats, I ran them through my drum sander again to ensure common thickness and then to also have that finished roundover edge. Is this the only way I could have done this? No. Is this something that really needed to be done? No. Are you really going to notice? Probably not, but then you would probably also notice that it wasn't done. You would notice that the edges are sharp, that the edges are maybe splintery, that the edges are not finished. Putting this little finishing touch just elevates the project that little bit, which I think sets it above anything else. So yeah, round over the edges, run into the drum sander again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And it's not a quick process. It takes time, but that's the whole point. You take the time to do the things that people don't want to do. That's what sets you apart. And to finish the boards and to really bring out that warm, luxurious golden color, we ended up going with a white bond polyurethane and satin finish, just enough to seal the wood, keep it from staining, and to bring out that wonderful color. And with everything being finished, it's time to load up for the install. We're heading down to Lancaster to visit my friend and to install his acoustic accent wall. Working off-site is always a little bit of a challenge, just trying to make sure that I have everything with me, but I've developed a little bit of a checklist to make sure that I have everything I need.
No, it isn't fair to keep going.
Sorry, that was just a little preview of the room that I'll be installing this acoustic wall in. As you can see, he has a wonderful sound system, and we're just trying to bring it up that extra notch. We're trying to turn it all up to 11. This is actually the first time seeing this space in person. I designed and built everything off of a few measurements and a picture of the wall that was sent to me. Thankfully, those measurements were perfect. Having pre-drilled all my slats and cross pieces meant that my layout needed to be precise. My layout needed to be exactly where it needed to be because everything was prefabricated. This was actually a plaster and brick wall, so on the one hand, it made it easy because I could drill and mount the blocking wherever I needed it to be. On the other hand, the plaster and the brick were slightly crumbly, and 2 out of the 3 anchoring systems that I brought with me to figure this out didn't work, and the one anchor that did work, I did not bring enough of. After a quick trip to Home Depot and stopping at Slugger's for some pizza, we went back to work, putting the anchors in the wall and installing my blocking. Because of the nature of having everything already pre-drilled and pre-made, I installed my blocking in a grid pattern so that all my cross pieces would end up hitting the blocking, and then I would be able to install the slats. There were several reasons for the floating nature of this wall. First and foremost, the floating nature of the wall with the space between the wall and the acoustic wall, so the fake wall and the real wall, means that there's space for the sound to resonate between the two, causing a richer, deeper sound with the sound system. Along with that, the floating wall also meant that I can overlap the baseboard without having to cut it, which is always a bonus. In my mind, this was going to be a very quick install, and as is quite often the case, it ended up taking a little bit longer than I anticipated. And one of the consequences of that was that the battery in my camera did not last long enough to get much more footage of installing the last of this wall. You can see how that first column of the cross pieces go across the wall, going from blocking to blocking, and then how I am hammering in these white nylon dowels that the slats will be attached to. I had made a big deal earlier in the video about there being 330 holes. There weren't quite that many. I had ordered 300 dowels. There was more than 300, less than 330, so I was wrong and had to order more dowels and have them shipped to the house for my friend to install to finish out the build. I apologize for not being able to do basic math. The end result, though, it's absolutely stunning. It's clean, it's modern, it's bright, and it's functional. It ticks all of the boxes. I don't know what else I could have wanted from this build, and it's sassafras. Who would have thought?